Blog Talk Radio.
Thank you. County 23, I'll give you a corrected address, folks. We have a fire in a one-story ordinary. Looks like it's about 40 by 120, 125. County 23, we'll get to traffic control. Squad 5, Squad 5. Over to 273, 273. Over Battalion 18, 18th Battalion. With the 273, 273.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I'm your host, Tom Merrill, and I'm glad you're on board with me this evening. It's great to have you, and thanks to Fire Engineering for sponsoring these talk radio shows and letting fire service people from all over the world really get the word out about our great fire service and how we can all make it better. And this is the show that's dedicated to the volunteer fire service and all those great volunteer firefighters out there, and all the great firefighters out there, for that matter, that support the main premise of this show in my presentation and my articles, that being considered a professional firefighter really has nothing to do with earning a paycheck, and it has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service and training as hard as you can to be as prepared as you can. No matter what role you play in your hometown volunteer department, we want to be as prepared as possible to serve in our role to the best of our ability. And we want to take care of not just our community and the people who need us, but we want to take care of our members as well, our own members. And that's what this show is all about. And I'm very passionate about it, as are so many other people out there. And I'm glad you're on board with me tonight to listen in to what we talk about. And if you have anything that you'd like to call in and talk about, the number is always there for you to call in on. It's 760-454-8852. And you may have to bear with me a little bit as I'm fighting a cold. Last week when I was at FDIC, my hometown in Buffalo, the temperatures were in the mid to upper 80s. And today I don't even think we hit 50, and it's raw and cold and windy, and so I'm struggling through here, but we got a glass of water, we got some cough drops, so we're going to be okay. And thanks for tuning in. And it's Tuesday, May 2nd, 2017, even though, like I said, it feels like it's November 2nd. And I did mention FDIC last week, and wow, I've been going, 20 times now, 18 times, somewhere around there, since the 1990s when I started going with my volunteer department as a young officer. And my God, I come back more fired up every single year. There's just so much going on there. It is the premier fire event, fire show throughout the world. And again, it was another record year. I'm hearing there were close to 34,000 attendees. I believe the actual number was something crazy like 33,979 attendees. Firefighters, are you kidding me? Imagine that in one city. Well, it was great. Those firefighters, those 34,000 firefighters, came from 58 countries. And oh, by the way, there were nearly 800 exhibitors as well on the show floor, showing off all the great products that they had to show and demonstrate. And wow, what an incredible job by Bobby Halton, Diane Rothschild, and the entire staff at Penwell and Fire Engineering, Ginger and the AV crew, and all the people that it takes to finally choreograph that operation and put on such an amazing event. It truly is an amazing event. If you were fortunate enough to be there, that's fantastic. If you haven't been there yet, try and schedule it for next year. See if you can work it in, because not only do you learn a lot, but you come back fired up, no pun intended, to do the best you can do in your department, to move your department forward, to bring all sorts of great training ideas and things that you've learned in the classes back to your hometown department to see how they can apply there. And just another absolutely fantastic year where I was able to also, and this is another side note on FDIC, the networking is incredible. And yes, you can network with some of the fire service legends, such as Alan Brunacini, Rick Lasky, John Salka, John Norman, Bobby Halton, Angie Hughes, and so many others, including the one we're going to have on our show tonight. But you meet so many other rank-and-file firefighters from big departments and small, busy and not so busy, well-financed, not so well-financed. And next year when you go, you'll have even more friends to network with, because that's what happens. The friendships grow and you reconnect every year, and it just is an amazing event. And yes, I went and taught my presentation one day last Monday. I had a great class, great people, great networking with those people, great engagement with those people. But you know what? I was there to learn too, and I learned not just from the people in my class. I always say that I can learn so much from the people in my class, but I'm also there to go to other classes, and I took about 10 other classes. I think I got 10 certificates, and I actually spent more time, I think, in training classes than I did on the showroom floor, because there's just not enough time to do everything you want to do. And just took fantastic classes on engine operations and leadership and current events in the fire service, and making your department, keeping it risk-free by practicing good reputation management skills and things you can do to make your department shine in the public's eye. And I wrote down a ton of quotes. What I like to do, and it's something I like to talk to my members about, is we go to classes and some of us take notes. A lot of people take notes. I saw a lot of people writing notes down. But what do you do with those notes? Do you stuff them in a drawer and forget about them? Do you have some sort of system in place that you can refer to them to refresh your mind every now and then as to what you wrote down? And what I do, and this works for me, is I write them by hand, of course, in the class, although I am seeing, especially the newer generation, you're typing them right away, and I give you credit for that. There's no way I could do that. I've got the yellow legal pad, and I'm scratching away. But I've noticed more and more computers on people's on the desk in front of them, and they're typing away, which is great. But I go back then and retype my notes, and I find that it reinforces what I learned and wrote down quickly, and then I organize them by categories, and I have a folder on my computer, notes from seminars, and every now and then I'll open up one or two of the notes and review it while I'm sitting at my computer. And I keep them brief to reinforce the main message, but it's a great way for me to keep them fresh in my mind, and every now and then review some of the things I learned. And what I found myself doing this year, in addition to taking notes, I wrote down some quotes. There were some fantastic quotes, and if anyone's ever seen my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page, I love quotes, and I love applying quotes to the fire service. If you haven't checked out the Facebook page, please feel free to subscribe to it. It's the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. I try to keep it timely with lots of important articles affecting the volunteer fire service, as well as leadership tidbits and other tidbits that can make our departments a little better and keep up with current events. But I so many great quotes that I wrote down. Like, here's one: if you don't tell somebody they did something wrong, then don't be surprised when they do it again. And in the same class, it's what you accept in your presence becomes your standard. And those two quotes really highlight the importance of correcting mistakes right away, not walking away from a mistake and saying, we don't have to talk about that. They know better. No, this class reinforced that it is important to correct mistakes right away. And I took a lot of leadership classes because I continue to find, as I go around the country and talk to firefighters, especially volunteer firefighters, leadership is a huge issue, good and bad. And a lot of people looking for strong leadership from their department officers, and a couple quotes that stuck with me. If you want to retain the loyalty of those who are present, then be loyal to those who are absent. And that's all about talking behind people's backs, because it gets back to them. And as a leader and as a strong officer, you want that loyalty of your members, and they want to know you have their back and you're not talking behind it. And you should be strong and brave enough and professional enough to talk to them one-on-one in their presence to correct things that you might view need correcting. And we all have sometimes issues in our departments, and we want to address it. So complaining about a problem without proposing a solution, well, that's called whining. So the importance there, or the point there, is if you're not happy with something before complaining about it, come up with a solution. Because other than that, you're just going to be sent on your way as a whiner. And sometimes we have officers that, now that they have the speaking trumpets or the brass, or they become a lieutenant or even a chief, they like to show what they know. And that's okay, but as Teddy Roosevelt reminded us, and as it was reinforced in one of my classes on leadership, nobody really cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's all about the importance of officers caring and taking care of their crew. And again, being upfront with them and getting their loyalty by being honest and open with them. And there are only two types of leaders, which was reinforced in another leadership class that I took, and it's effective leaders. And there are no bad crews. There's really only bad officers. So if your crew is not performing to the level you want them to, the first thing to do is to look in the mirror and see what can I do better. And if you get a chance, go online and Google FDIC.com and watch the opening ceremony. There were just some fantastic speeches this year. Of course, Bobby Halton always brings the house down. Angela Hughes did a fantastic keynote address. But one that really stuck with me was the chief of the Indianapolis Fire Department, Ernest Malone. What a class act. Had so many great words of wisdom in his 10 or 15-minute welcome that he did. It was a welcome. And my God, he had some great leadership lessons in his welcome. And to paraphrase one, you earn respect as an officer not by what you do, or by what you do, not by what you say. The importance of as officers, we can talk all we want, but it's in our actions that really speak volumes for earning the respect that we think we deserve as officers, but you know what? Got to earn that respect. And as Chief Malone said, displaying humility is not thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. And one thing we talk about a lot in my professional presentation is not damaging our department's image and reputation with our community. And Candace McDonald had a great class on reputation management, and she had a great quote in her class. And you cannot take something off the internet. It's like trying to take pee out of a pool. I thought that really summed it up well about be careful and think twice before you hit post. Because even if you think you can take it away down the road a little bit, it's going to be there for all time for people to find. So you can't take something off the internet. It's like trying to take pee out of a pool. Candace, that's classic. I love it. And what a way to make a good point. And also our subject tonight that we're going to get into shortly, I took some engine operation classes. And Kurt Isaacson had some great lines, and some Bill Guston has a great line. And I don't know of any fires that get worse by putting water on it, but I know of a lot of fires that get a lot worse by not putting water on it. And it's Captain Bill Guston from the Miami-Dade Fire Department, who's always entertaining to watch. And Kurt Isaacson reminded us to know our flow. Know what your lines are actually flowing. Help you make a more educated decision on what nozzles you're using and how you're applying them in your fire attack. And then another great quote from our guest tonight: the May Day is the most undisciplined event on the fire ground that requires the most discipline. And that was in Tim Klett's class that I took on Friday. And the engine company officer from the firehouse to the fire floor. And if anybody doesn't know who Tim Klett is, let me just introduce him. He's over 30 years now, veteran in the fire service. He's a lieutenant in the FDNY, been serving on engine 88, or 88 engine, I should say, I guess, for quite a while now. And he is also a volunteer firefighter. He actually started as a volunteer firefighter. He's been involved in training at FDIC and also many other conferences, and he also writes many articles, and just is always out there preaching engine company operations and so many other great fire service classes that he presents on, and I'm glad to have him with us. We had him on just about over a year ago now, and we always wanted to do part two because we spent 2 hours the last time he was on talking engine operations and the role of the engine firefighter, and we barely scratched the surface. So we always said we were going to do a second show, and I ran into him at FDIC last week at his class, and he was free tonight. So I'm glad to have him on board. And again, that number, if anybody wants to call in and speak to Tim, it's 760-454-8852. And without further ado, Lieutenant Klett, are you with us?
I sure am, Tom. How are you?
I'm doing great, and thank you for being here with us this evening.
Oh, that's not a problem. Not a problem. I can't stop what about what you were saying about the FDIC. I mean, it was just a great conference, and I've been going there. God, I think the first time I went there was in '95, and it's just gotten bigger and better. And it's the first time I've been back in a few years, and I was really surprised on how well-oiled of a machine it is now, as far as getting the information out there, getting the full gamut of classes. I mean, whatever you want to take, it's there. I mean, you can take milking cows to raising portable ladders. It just covers the gamut of everything you need to go out and study on in the fire service. It was just a very, very good conference. And I thank Bobby Halton for asking me to come back and do a class for him again this year.
It is amazing, and not just the amount of classes, but I just can't imagine choreographing all of that and the buses to take every one of the hot classes and just having everything aligned. And you're right, Bobby Halton, what an amazing man, and what a great person. And he's out there at 6 o'clock in the morning as everyone's getting on the bus. He's revving them up and high-fiving people. Then he walked into one of the classes I was in and sat down and went up and shook the instructor's hand. And then you see him that night at all the events, networking events that night. He doesn't stop. He's amazing.
Well, I do believe, I mean, he's a guy that really cares about the fire service, and he cares about the little people. He's not the guy that's out there just trying to bump elbows with the chiefs and the officers. I mean, he cares right down to the most junior fireman in the slowest volunteer fire department in the country. He just, and if he could bring training to every one of those places, I believe he really would. I mean, he really is hands-on in everything he does, and he wants to bring the best training to as many people as he can and get as much information out there as he can. So, kudos to him for bringing what he does to Indianapolis every year.
And the way he just stops and talks to everyone just exemplifies what you said. There's no ego at all. He'll make time for absolutely anybody. As a matter of fact, he gives his phone number out freely, and he is the type of individual who answers his phone whether he recognizes the phone number dialing in or not. He wants to hear from the firefighters. He wants to talk to the firefighters, and more importantly, he wants to befriend every single firefighter that he can. He is amazing, and so
he
a great week.
He does have that unique ability to make everybody feel like you're his best friend. He does have that unique ability, like, you walk away from him, you hear him talking to somebody else, and you're like, wait a minute, I thought I was his best friend. He has that ability.
And he doesn't forget a name either. He's amazing.
No, he's very good like that. Me, I'm just the worst in that.
I know. I'd like to learn his secret for that. Maybe I can get him on someday and share some secrets on that. But and the whole staff.
That's why I wear a name tag. I forget mine.
Absolutely, and the whole Penwell staff, and I mean, just first class operation. And for everyone listening out there, again, we've talked about it so much. If you can get there at all, try to make it to FDIC. Speaking of which, Tim, I know I did stop in. I was in your class. Always a great class. And it's from the firehouse to the fire floor, talking about the engine company officer, and a lot of good information. But before we even get into like engine specific information or engine firefighter or engine officer specific information, you also had some other tidbits of great information as well for firefighters and for fire officers. And you started the class off right away. And this highlights my whole professional theory about what does the public expect. It's not like they say send the volunteer fire department, send the paid fire department. What do they say? Send the fire department, right? So people are expecting us to bring a level of expertise.
Yeah, I think we covered it also a year ago. We even talked about this, and I'm one of those guys that absolutely believe that you go out that door and you're in the streets of whatever community you're in, you are a professional firefighter, and the people that we're sworn to protect deserve that from us. They, like you said, they don't pick up the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning at the worst possible moment in their life and say, send the paid guys. I don't want those volunteers. They don't say that. They want the fire department. They want the professional firemen that are down the street and around the corner, and whether you're a volunteer or not. And another big thing about that is that the fire doesn't care either. Do you think
That's
the fire
true.
really cares if you're getting a paid vacation or a pension? Fire doesn't care. It'll take
hurt
your life
you just
as
as bad,
quick
too.
as it'll take mine. So
Yeah,
you
that's
have
for
to be
sure.
a professional firefighter and have that professional mindset. It's okay. You get in your car, you go home after the fire or after the run, but you're still, when you're on that run, the level of professionalism is no different than when I'm sitting in the front seat of a fire truck driving through the South Bronx. That you have to be on your A game. It doesn't matter. I always make the joke that they took a piece of wood from some small place in upstate New York, and they took a piece of wood from the Bronx and lit them both on fire. And would you believe they burned just as hot? Some people believe that wood burns hotter in a paid fire department. It's just not true.
Yeah, what a great point. And the other thing is too, what I always like to say too, I understand, there's all different roles in the fire service, especially in our volunteer fire service. Everyone plays a different role. Maybe not everybody is a frontline firefighter. Not everybody is going to be dragging the line in, because again, we have different roles, different service models for the volunteer departments, but everyone can still be a professional no matter what your role is in your department.
But whatever you decide to do. When I was a volunteer in Newington, Connecticut, years and years ago, there was a couple of guys that, they were older guys, and they wanted no part of going into a building that was on fire. They just didn't want any part of it. But they were exceptional drivers and exceptional pump operators, and so they excelled at what they decided they wanted to do for their volunteer fire department. And they were actually, what you would call now professional pump operators. They were great. I mean, they wanted no part of going into the fire, but they became very proficient and professionals at what they chose to do. And that's all you can ask anybody. If you want to go in and you just want to raise ladders, be the professional portable ladder raiser.
Absolutely.
Or be the professional, line feeder, or whatever it takes. There's a lot of tasks on the fire ground. Not all of them are necessarily in the building that's on fire or in what you'd say is the IDLH. There's a lot of other support, systems out there that you can be professional at. So it's just, I said, I totally agree with you. There's so many things out there on the fire ground that need to be done that really just about anybody can do and be professional at.
My gosh, directing traffic, scene support, like you said, raising. There's just so much that goes into it, and just be the best you can be in it. And with that, in the volunteer fire service, there is a role for just about everybody. So we're all hurting for members, but not everyone has to be a frontline member. So there's some recruitment ideas to work in there, but. The good leader in the firehouse. You started off in your class talking about officers and the role they play in forming a good engine crew, any good crew for that matter. And if I remember, you had 5 different types of officers that you brought up in class. Do you remember that there was reluctant, the uncertain?
There's ego-driven. There's reluctant officers. Believe it or not, I don't know them all off the top of my head when I had in that one slide, but it really doesn't matter. I mean, we all know, we can think back to, through time to all the officers that we've had, and you can categorize them as ego-driven, and we know who they are. And like in the paid side, it's, making the transition from a fireman to an officer is a lot easier than the volunteer side. There's a lot of things that are a lot easier on the professional, on the paid side than the volunteer side in the fire service that are easier. We've been talking a lot where I am now a volunteer about morale and how do you improve morale. And they asked me how in the paid side do you improve morale? And I says, well, that's fairly easy. Once every other week they get this thing called the paycheck. It does wonders for morale. Do you know what I mean? But in the volunteer side, it is all about morale. I mean, getting guys to join and getting guys to come to drills and getting guys to be professional, it is all about morale. And that morale system does fall into the lap of the company officers. The chiefs become a little bit removed from morale, but they have a big part of it. But those company officers have a big part of that morale. So if you're reluctant or if you're a guy that just wants to be an ego-driven officer just because he wants the brass, like you said, firefighters are very smart individuals. They'll sniff you out in a minute. They'll know exactly what you stand for, exactly who you are as an officer, quite rapidly. And whether you're paid or volunteer, it doesn't matter. They know. They know what they want in an officer, and if you don't, show them that fairly quickly, they're going to know right away. They're going to know that you're hesitant, you don't want to make a decision. And I always say firemen are like army ants. They want to be told what to do. Give them something to do. They want you to make a decision. And to me, the indecisive officer is one of the worst. The guy that can't make a decision. And believe me, firefighters will see that in a second. And from something as simple as conducting a drill or when to leave a scene or real simple decisions. If you can't make those, the tough ones will never come.
Yeah, and you know what you said, too, about making a decision. So important. I remember one of the great lines from the movie Midway. I'm a big military buff. It was, when in command, command. And it's so true. If your people will see through indecisive officers. And that was one of the one of your traits that you talked about. You talked about the reluctant officer who was there only for the status. Like you said, the brass on the collar, or maybe even in your paid side, some people might be in it just because of the pay raise. And then
there's the unorganized guy, the uncertain guy. There's all kinds of.
And weak.
And then, like I said, we talk all of them lead to becoming what we would call as a toxic officer. I mean, just a guy that is, like again in the volunteer side, they're just waiting for the year to go by so they can replace him, when you become a toxic officer like that. And the other thing is, like, you have to understand is there's a great line that I heard years ago, the mission, the men, and me. Yeah, I don't know if you ever heard that line, the mission, the men, and me.
I have heard of the book. Yeah, it's on my read list. I haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that's kind of the mindset that I take, and I think officers take, is, when we're outside in the streets, there's nothing more important than the mission, and then come the men, and then me. So in that pecking order, in that pyramid, I'm the last guy I should be worrying about. And like I said in the class, the ego-driven officer will never say this. He's the Mexican guy that's singing "ay, ay, ay, ay."
Yeah.
But when we win, it's them, and when we lose, it's me. So what I mean is, we go out and we make what the fire service calls a great stop, and we do very well. And it doesn't, a great stop is a fire, but a great stop could be any incident we go to, a car accident, just when the company operates great, and when we win and we look good, and when that happens, it's the men. It's not. It's them. Those are the ones who have won. And if we go out and we fail and we don't do our jobs, that's on me. That's on that officer. He has to take responsibility. He's got to take ownership of that failure, because if he's the guy that's entrusted in their training and all that other stuff, and when they're on the rig, handing out what tasks need to be done and making those decisions, if it fails, he's got to take ownership of that. It doesn't mean he's not going to try to correct it and sit down and have a post-fire critique and talk to the guys about what happened. But in the end, the men will see that. They'll understand that, listen, you have their backs and you have their best interest. And like we said in the class, when we talk about the officers, trust is huge. If the men don't trust you, if the firefighters don't trust you, then you might as well just hang it up right now. You've got to have that trust, and you've got to earn that trust. And it's not a simple thing to do. And again, they're watching. It's, you say Big Brother's watching, especially a new officer. If you're getting elected on a Monday night or a Tuesday night meeting, and in a week you're going to be an officer, believe me, they're watching. And everything you do is going to have that aura of trust wrapped around it. Like you said about
another line I heard,
talking behind someone's back.
Right. And another line I heard is trust is it's earned in drips but lost in buckets. And it takes a while to earn that trust, but it takes seconds to lose it.
And I said that in my class. It takes a while. I always ask a student, if we went to a fire right now, would you trust me? And a lot of people, based on pedigree and because I have these 4 letters attached to my name, would trust me just because I work at a big city, and that's not right. It's wrong. I have to earn your trust.
Yeah.
And it takes time. But one poor decision, whether it's in the firehouse or out in the street, it doesn't really matter where you break that trust. once it's broken, it's extremely difficult to re-earn that trust, to regain that trust in the firefighters. So, it's not an easy task being that company level officer. And even like we said in the class, a lot of those, you have to have that trust, because a lot of those risk-based decisions, putting your members at risk is the company officer. It's really not the chief. The chief's going to give me a task. The chief's going to say, hey, Timmy, can you get up there and see what you can do on the top floor? And I get to the top of the stairs on the top floor. If I think we can do it, I go in. If I don't think we can do it, I tell the chief, hey, listen, it doesn't look like we can do anything up here. But I'm the one who makes that decision whether my guys are going to go in and do that. And that's a big responsibility when you start talking about, you got 3 or 4 people who have to trust you when I say, hey, we can do this. Let's get in there and do our jobs. Yeah,
right. It is a big, big responsibility. And, speaking of responsibility, Tim, I like to say that, sometimes we become an officer, especially in our volunteer departments, where we're electing somebody or appointing somebody to a position, hopefully, and in a lot of cases, because they are a good firefighter, they've taken a lot of training, and they're really gung-ho and into it. And in some cases, it's because this person has a lot of time because they're a college student and not working full-time, or in some cases even a retiree. Which is great. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I think that we all have a personal responsibility as well as officers to look in the mirror and say, what can I do to be better? In other words, once you get those speaking trumpets, you're not done learning ever, and you need to be responsible to yourself to learn how to work with people, to motivate your team, to inspire people, to learn that not everyone thinks the way you do, and we have all different learning curves and backgrounds in our volunteer service, and we need to mold them into the team we want them to be. In other words, everyone wants that perfect team, but you're dealt the cards. It's how you play your hand that really matters. You've got to mold that team.
Oh, absolutely. And again, unfortunately, the volunteer fire service is a time restricted service where you can only give so much time, because you do have a full-time job and you do have a family, and you can only give so much time. But I still believe that if you're going to be the person that's going to step up and say, listen, I think I can be this company level officer, you owe it not only to yourself but the people that you're going to be giving orders to get out there and try to learn as much about that position as you can, and maybe take a class here and there about leadership and decision making, and have the ability to spend more time. I believe that if you don't have the time to be an officer, don't even put your name in the hat. Because
right.
It has the tendency to double the amount of time you're already putting in.
And what I like to say is the department, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I got to think in a paid department, especially as big as FDNY, but you become an officer, part of your job now is maybe to go on for continuing education where they have officer development and leadership classes. Not so much in the volunteers, although, yes, there's county and state and local classes that maybe come around your area and you hope to take advantage of them, but even that's difficult, trying to work that in with your, putting food on the table job. But, again, when I say you have a responsibility to yourself, pick up a book, go on the Internet. There's no shortage of great leadership lessons. Every day on the fire websites, there's great leadership articles on how people have dealt with situations and other firefighters. But there's so many great books out there, from Step Up and Lead to 5-Alarm Leadership to First In, Last Out, to maybe not even fire department-related books, such as what you said, The Mission, the Men, and Me, or I read the book by the great Navy SEAL Jocko, Extreme Ownership. And there's just no shortage of helpful information out there that leaders out there, officers, get your hands on it and read and make yourself better able to mold your team and inspire them. Well, and the important thing to remember about some of those books that you had just mentioned, there's a ton of them out there. There's another great book called On Combat. It has a lot of leadership sections in it, but not only are those books and that reading is going to help you in the fire service, but it's going to help you in really whatever you do outside the fire service. Sure. That's an all-purpose read. It's not just
it's not just a read that's solely dedicated to the fire service. It's not like reading a pump operations book. You're reading a book on leadership. So that's an all-purpose read. So, if you got a job somewhere else and you're you're a night manager or you're a grocery manager and you're the fireman on the side, those books are going to help you in your professional career too, and also on the fire side. And another thing about reading is, especially if you're an officer, is build that read into, whether it's a leadership read or not, into your company drills. So if you're going to conduct a drill, spend a half an hour before you go to the fires on the internet or in a book coming up with a drill. Not only are you going to be teaching the firefighters more, you're going to be learning more yourself in a half an hour to an hour read prior to the drill night. So as an officer, get your hands wet, get into the books, and be the one that truly be that leader. Say,
Yep.
I have the
Be
drill
prepared.
tonight. I'm going to do it. Get the answers. Be prepared. Prepare yourself. So all of that, the one good thing about the books you mentioned, not only it'll help you in the fire service, but it's going to help you in your professional life too. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
So those
Absolutely.
reads there are all purpose reads. They're not just strictly for the fire service.
Right. I used to tell my younger firefighters that are going to college, I would encourage them, even if their college curriculum they didn't need to take leadership classes, say they weren't taking any business or degrees like that, whatever they were taking, I said, hey, chances are you have to take an elective or two, if possible. See if there's any leadership electives, because not only, just like what you said, Tim, not only will it help you in the fire service, but no matter where you go in life, these lessons will stay with you. No matter, even if you don't even stay in the department that long, because your job now, your paid job, takes you out of the area to maybe some city that doesn't have a volunteer department or whatever, these lessons will stay with you, and you will learn how to work with people better and have those for the rest of your life.
And not only that, even for the fireman level, even if you don't have any aspirations to become an officer, those reads, I always tell people when I give an officer's class, a lot of guys take them and I say, do you have any drive to be an officer? Do you ever want to be an officer? And a lot say no, most say yes. But I tell them that, by you coming to a class, whether you want to be an officer or not, as a fireman, to an officer's class, it does pertain to you just like these reads, because then you have a better understanding of why officers or why leaders do things. So if you read a leadership book as a fireman and you don't want to be an officer, you can better understand that officer and how he goes about things and why he does the things he does and acts the way he does. Sometimes what an officer can do might seem a little bit, abnormal or different from what a fireman looks at. And it's all about, I don't talk, if I want to talk to another officer about an issue in a firehouse, I don't talk to him in the kitchen. And the guys see me on a number of occasions tell the officer, hey, let's just go talk out on the apparatus floor here. And sometimes they don't understand that, but then once they get to that position, they'll understand that there is a bit of a separation. And by reading those books, even as a fireman, you may understand, why officers do what they do, how they come about their decision making, why they act the way they do. Like I said, a good quality for an officer to have is knowing when to step in and knowing when to step away. Right? And there's that fine line of knowing when it's your time, when you should have to step into this thing, or sometimes, let them figure it out themselves and I should just step away. And, by reading those books, it's just as fire, you may understand, the thought process, coming to that conclusion about stepping in or stepping away. Yeah.
And like you said, one of the biggest things with developing that cohesion with the crew is respecting them. They need to know that you have their back. And like you said, I believe it's you praise down to the troops when they do well, but if there's a problem, you take the brunt of that and criticize up.
And they'll see that. Like I said, there's no such thing as lip service as an officer.
Right.
And whether it's the paid or the volunteer side, it doesn't matter. If someone asks me if I can do something for them, I stop what I'm doing and I take care of it. And not because I just want them to see me, because I'll forget. Let's be honest here. But follow through, whether it's trying to get a guy a new set of gloves, or if a guy has a problem with something, or or he wants to go to a class or whatever it might be, and he comes to you as his officer, and you say, listen, I'll look into it. Look into it. Okay?
Right.
Have
huge.
That personal connection, and get back to them and let them know that, listen, I'm home having dinner too, but I found this out. This is what I found out about this incident. I'm still looking into it, but I want to let you know where we are with this. I always say that, it's not personal, but it has to be personal. And what I mean is, in those instances, it's got to be personal. As an officer, I learned a long time ago. I had an officer that, when my father was sick, and I just told him, listen, I'm going to shoot up to Connecticut, and I'll be back down for my night tour because my father was sick. 2-3 days later, he called me at home and asked me how my father was doing. And that little thing, that 2-minute phone call of saying, hey, Tim, I'm just checking, how's your dad doing? You'd be surprised. I mean, that stuck with me for a very, very long time, that this guy just remembered and actually called me and asked. And it's those little things that guys remember. And that's the personal side of it. The unpersonal side of it is really in our decision-making. We pull up and I have a good body of fire, and I might have a probie on the nozzle. And I think I said this the other day, if I don't think he can handle it yet because it's just a really good body of fire and the situation dictates I'd rather have a guy with more time, I'll take the probie off the nozzle and give it to somebody else. It's not personal. It's not because I don't like you. It's not that I don't think you're a good fireman. I just don't think you're ready for this, and I think he's the better guy. Or forcing the door. He's the better guy at forcing the door right now. That's the guy I want doing it. It's not personal. It's not personal. It's not that I don't like you. It's just that we have a job to do. We have an obligation to take care of this, and I will do whatever I need to do and to make my decisions based on what I need to do to get that incident taken care of. It's not personal, but like we said before, some things are personal with it.
Yeah, you did. Very good point there too about just being responsive to your people, and what's funny, you said earlier too, when it came to names, you forget. So I'm the same way. I forget a lot, and when I was chief of my department, and people laughed at me, but I had systems in place where I was constantly writing things down to remind myself to do things, and such as what you mentioned. If I knew somebody was having a situation or asked me a question that I promised them I would get an answer for them on, I'd write it down so I could get back to them in a timely manner, because we talked about trust, we talked about how huge it is. Well, one way they lose trust in you is if you don't get back to them in a timely manner. So whatever system works for you, come up with a system that works and write it down if you have to. And on the
volunteer side, that's huge, because morale is everything. Morale is everything on the volunteer side, so that's huge. They want to know that you have a vested interest in them. They're coming down on their own time. Right. If they have an issue, that needs to be taken care of, you'll see as you do those things, as you become more invested in them, then that morale will turn. It'll start an uptick in morale. The guys are going to want to come down and say, oh, hey, listen, can you do it? It's not they're going to keep coming to you for everything. Hey, listen, there was an ant on my car. Can you get it off? It's not that. But if they know you're going to get things done, they're more willing to step up and do stuff. Right. And that's what we want. We want guys to come to the firehouse and be willing to step up. And talking about that and getting into training a little bit. Another good aspect is never beat anybody down. You want to create an environment where guys are actually willing and aren't afraid to fail at a drill in the firehouse. And I always tell them, that's where we want it to happen. I want you to fail here. I'm not going to beat you down if you do. I'm not going to call you names if you do, because I want you to. Because if you're not failing in the firehouse, then you're not really drilling. And what I mean by that is, the guy that's afraid to fail in front of everybody won't get involved in the drill. He'll stand off to the side and watch it. But if you create an environment or a tone where if he does make a mistake, you're going to take him, you'll put your arm around him and say, listen, try this, let's do this, and see if that works. He's going to be more willing to step in and get a hands-on, and knowing that he's not going to get beat up if he fails. And that is enormous as far as that learning curve is concerned, to really get information into these young firemen. And if you create that environment where, number one is, if you're going to force a door, you're going to force it first to show them. If you're going to do a window bailout, as an officer, go first. Let them know that you're fallible too. You can do these things. And then if they fail doing it, hey, listen, no big deal, let's try it again. If you beat them up and you let other guys beat them up, they're going to be less willing to really step up and try stuff, and they're not going to learn a thing. So you have to create that environment.
And when that page goes out for the training drill tomorrow night at 19:30 hours, they're going to look around their house and say, I think I'm going to stay home. I'm more comfortable here. And that's not what we want.
You see it already. I mean, who's doing Monday night's drill? Oh, it's him. I'm not going to go down. I'll go next Monday. I know that Timmy's doing the drill next week. You know, and so you can see it. You can see, and that's that whole trust thing again. It's just, it's that building blocks of what we do to build a company, and that's one of those things, that trust, and then you know that you're not going to be.
It's also it gets back to what I said too about it's also the personal responsibility thing too. Hey, you have a responsibility to prepare properly and fire up your troops and have drills ready to go and volunteer to lead those drills. So it's all that. And hey, real quick, I just want to remind our listeners this is Fire Engineering, Blog Talk Radio, and tonight's episode of the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. And I want to thank everyone for listening in. And our special guest tonight is Tim Klett from the FDNY and also a volunteer firefighter. And we're talking about many things in the volunteer fire service. We will get to engine operations and some specific fire tactics and strategies in a second. But I'm glad, I like where this went regarding building that morale in the firehouse. And, oh, by the way, if anyone wants to call in, it's 760-454-8852 if anybody has a question for Tim or even of me. But I like where we're going, and if we can talk just a few more minutes on, because it's a question, not a question, but it's a situation that people, and they probably bring it up to you a lot too. As a matter of fact, I think you mentioned they did bring it up to you, and as someone that's out there teaching that, you hear people come up and ask all sorts of questions and look for advice. And we do get that question all the time, don't we, about, hey, the morale's suffering in my department. What can I do to reignite the passion? And you hit on a big part of that falls to the company officer, right? They set the tone.
Well, it's funny. We had a talk the other night because there's an officer's vacancy in my volunteer department. My son Dan was actually a lieutenant there, and he had to leave. He actually just got hired in the city of Baltimore Fire Department.
I saw that. That's
so he's
awesome.
down there now.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
that makes you proud.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. And so I got my other son Connor here, and he actually joined another volunteer department down at college, East Stroudsburg. So he's really into it too. And the three of us, because we just had the awards dinner the other night, we're talking about morale and how to improve it. And and guys have been asking me to run for the open lieutenant spot, and I don't know if I want to. I just, because I want to be able to do it the right way and have enough time to do it. But I talked with a couple of the other officers, and if I did, I think the first thing I would do is I would give it to the firemen. I would ask them, what do we need to do? Where did we go wrong? Because we failed as officers if the morale is bad, and what do we need to change it? And give them a piece of paper, a questionnaire. What do we need? If you want to sign it, sign it. If you want to call people names, call people. But what do we need to do to make you want to come down here? What do we need to do? I think that would be the first step. If morale was that bad, I think that's what we'd have to do. Just put it to the men and say, hey, listen, what do we need to do? Put it to the companies, and we want your suggestions. I know they're trying. Like tonight, there's actually drill tonight. And they've been cooking meals after the drill. They've been having food after the drill to try to get more guys to come down. And it's been working in a way, which is helping. So, but I think that's a good step by saying, by doing the meals and also by saying, hey, listen, what do you need? What do you want us to do? What would you like to see here? What would make you want to come down here more, come to more drills? Are the drills
you might hear something you're not happy with.
But that's okay. That comes with the position. If you're going to be the officer who's going to try to keep everybody happy and be everybody's friend, then you're bound for failure. It's just the nature of the beast. The bottom line is, and at the end of the day, we still have an obligation to the people that we're sworn to protect. Yeah. And like you said about that one slide, the friend, the foe, or the CEO. Which officer are you? If you try to be their friends, if you're afraid that you're not going to make everybody happy, then no one's going to be happy. And I'm not saying that's not possible. I'm just saying you can't you can't go in to try to be the appeaser and just, whatever. So we have to be willing, if morale is low or if things aren't going right, to hear the bad stuff. We hear good stuff, and I want to hear good stuff, but I've got to be willing to hear what we're doing wrong. If I don't know what I'm doing wrong as an officer, then there's no way that I'm ever going to correct it. There's no way we're ever going to find a solution to any problem we have about correcting morale problems at the very least. So if you put those things out and someone writes something you may not like, you know what? Chalk it up and don't go try to figure out who it was. I know guys that would do that. I wonder who said that. I know that was him. You can't assume anything. If someone says something you don't like, you know what? It's a pretty good sign that morale's bad.
Yeah. And, a lot of it does, a lot of things do center around the training ground. And I think what we said earlier, there's so many things that go into making a good department drill. And what we said earlier is definitely a huge part of it. And the officer plays a huge part in that, and that's having it prepared and ready to go and organized. So when people show up, there's no one running around saying, what do you want to do tonight? And I've heard of stories like that. I'm sure you've heard of stories like that. What do you want to train on tonight? And it's even worse when they say, I don't know. Or people show up and the leader of the drill isn't there yet. And so what my answer to that problem is that can happen in our volunteer ranks. I never get stuck at work, ever get home from work and one of your kids is sick or your wife didn't get out of work or your husband didn't get out of work and now you're stuck home. So you got to have a plan B. So I used to encourage my officers to have a leader of the drill, the senior leader, with an assistant who worked on it together. But what does that require? It requires a little time. It requires thinking maybe a month or two. In some cases, I would have drills planned out 6 months ahead of time. So you have all these bugs worked out. Doesn't necessarily today meaning you always have to be face-to-face at the firehouse. You can do a lot via email and phone calls and texting so you're on the same page. But it all boils down to being prepared. Have a plan for good attendance, bad attendance. Have a plan to work your senior members in. Do you find that sometimes too, Tim, where senior members maybe are reluctant to go to drill because it's more of a basic drill? Well, make some advanced scenarios for your senior members. Make them a mentor or help teach the drill. There's so much you can do, isn't there?
Yeah, and we have a real gap in the membership. We have some very senior members, and then there's a kind of there's not many members that are in that middle of the road, and then we have a lot of young members. So we have, and I think generationally, I think could be part of the problem too. Is that that those older senior guys have very little in common with the younger guys. They both have the same drive and they want to get to the same place, but they don't seem to have anything in common besides the fact that they were both volunteer firemen. And
right.
So again, I think the tone of the drill. I think you couldn't be more correct in saying being prepared, because it sets the tone of the drill, and it's got to be, the tone has to be fun, but it's got to be a drill that's fun and very productive in the fact that, they're going to go away with something. And I don't care if it's one little tidbit, but if they came to the firehouse and left one little tidbit better than they showed up to the firehouse with, then as that company officer, that was a win for you that night. This guy went home. He as simple as, okay, now he knows how to set the Halligan bar. That's it. And the next drill, we'll show him a direction, or we'll talk about different locks. The problem is, I think that when you have younger firemen and you have a younger officer, he tries at, especially those first drills he's given, he gets it over his head and tries to teach too much. Just too. Let's okay. Tonight we're gonna talk about locks. We're not even going to talk about forcing them. We're going to talk about locks. Just say, hey, this is a rim lock. This is a Morse lock. This is a deadbolt. This is whatever. This is a hockey puck. Whatever lock. We're just going to show you locks. Next drill, we'll show you how to force some of these. You can't, because then what happens? Half the drill becomes peas on your plate, and we know that nobody likes peas. So you don't keep them. You throw them in the garbage.
Yeah. And I always like to say, too, the last thing you want your firefighters saying when they go home from the training ground and their significant other or whoever's home with them says, "Oh, how was drill tonight?" the last thing you want them saying, "Well, that was a complete waste of time." Because next week, when it's time to drill, they're going to find something else to do.
Exactly. You got to find a way, and circling back to what we said, you have to find a way to make them want to come down. They've got to want to be there.
Right.
It's
right. And that's just like being a good officer in the volunteer ranks. Yeah, you can order people to do things, but after a while that grows old. You want to inspire them to go and do things for you, because you're in the volunteers, and nobody's going to go down into a lousy environment, a nasty environment where people aren't getting along. And I like your dinner idea. I would think that's one way of bridging the gap between the generations. And I like to say we need to be respectful of the younger generation as much as they need to respect the older generation. There's got to be a way to come to that common ground where, when the tones go off.
There's absolutely a way. The drill, the forcing the door. Forcing a door shows it doesn't have gender, it doesn't have age, it doesn't have anything. It's just forcing a door. That's how we bridge the gap. And I always say when you know that you've made it is when you go to drill and you're prepared, and one of the guys that have some time ask you, "Do you mind if I run the drill?" You got it. Take it. If I want to add anything, I'll add something. But yeah. Or you'll go down, you'll get back from a run, and you don't have to tell them to wash the rig anymore or rinse off the tire with the wheel wells, or in the wintertime, wash down the rig. They get back and they're doing it. They know that that's what you expect. So those are those little indicators that you're beginning to make a difference where you've bridged that gap because of firematics, and that's the thing that ties them together. One guy's going to like ballroom music, the other guy's going to like rap. We're never going to be able to tie them together that way. But on the drill, on the fire ground, we can tie them together. Okay, that's the common ground from the senior guy to the young fireman, and you've got to capitalize on that. And I think that's key on how to get the guys with time that know as much as they do about not only the fire service but their own fire department and their traditions. That's where we bridge that gap at those drills, at the forcible entry door, or at the the water flowing prop. That's where we can bridge those gaps.
Yeah. There's a lot that can be done and should be done, but you hear that issue all over the country in big and small departments about trying to motivate people to come around the firehouse and drill and train, and I really think some of those items would really help, And the importance also of, I'll say this in the volunteering, you're volunteering for something that can kill you. Who else does that? I mean,
you don't see any volunteer cops, do you?
You signed up for something that can kill you. And I don't want to hear that, well, we only get one fire a year, or we haven't had a good fire in 2 or 3 years. I don't care, because the next time those tones drop, it could be that fire. What does Mike Lombardo always say? The longer it's been since your last fire, the closer you are to your next fire. So you owe it not just to yourself, but you owe it to me as your brother firefighter and your sister firefighters as well. You owe it to them to be prepared and train and drill. And as officers, you owe it to them to inspire them to attend the training, and you do that by following some of those steps we just talked about. All good stuff. Absolutely.
Yeah, you always got to bring your A game. Simple as that. And you said it a little earlier. The day that you think you know everything, like I tell the guys the day I believe that I know everything is the day I should retire, because the day that I believe I know everything is the day I become dangerous. You
have to stay on top of what's going on in the fire. I don't care if you've been in 30 years, you've been the chief of department, you're a commissioner now, whatever. It doesn't matter. You have to stay on top of what's going on. And also, Tim, if I'm not going, I've been in 35 years now, and I still try to go to our Wednesday night drills as often as I can if I'm not working or if there's not a family event going on. But that shows the new people that, hey, here's this 35-year veteran taking it seriously. I guess I got 6 months in. I should be taking it seriously, because at what point do you get dispensation to say, it doesn't pertain to you anymore?
Yeah, what do they call
it?
That?
Doesn't
Oh,
happen.
that's right. Lead by example, right? That's what they call
yeah,
that.
I've heard that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's the little tidbit
absolutely.
I heard a long, long time ago, you know?
And there's things you can do for those senior members to keep them involved. You can, we talked about that. You just be creative, officers. Be creative in what you're doing, and understand the role you play in shaping that morale in your department, and planning and implementing these really good drills. And again, folks, this is the Professional Volunteer Fire Department on Fire Engineering Talk Radio. If anyone would like to call in, the number again, 760-454-8852. And I'm so glad to have Tim Klett on with me tonight, talking about the volunteer fire service and leadership and officer roles and responsibilities. And I wanted to get into the last time you were on, we talked about the engine firefighter and the importance of getting that first hose line stretched and in operation. And we talked about the different roles of people on the hose line, the officer, the nozzle firefighter, backup firefighter, door firefighter. And I don't know if we said this famous line, but I'll start off with, the fire goes as the first line goes, right? Is that what Andy Fredericks used to preach? And I also love how we call a properly stretched and operating hand line is the best anti-bailout tool there is. We've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars preparing and equipping our firefighters to jump out windows, and it's a good thing to have that equipment. But you know what? If we get that line stretched and in operation, and we have good, capable, knowledgeable firefighters on that line, we don't have to jump out the window. So it's pretty important that we do that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a pretty simple concept, isn't it?
It sure is.
Yep.
It sure is. And there's just so much, sometimes we spend so much time worrying about some advanced scenarios and crazy situations. We don't properly maybe prepare as good as we should for stretching that line.
I think firemen, because they're so job oriented, we're like squirrels in a yard full of nuts. There's one. Oh, there's another one. There's another one. And we want to know as much about everything as we can. And unfortunately, I think the basics have taken a back seat. In this era now, where you have man versus machine and anti-terrorism, and everybody, as Mike says, wants to belong to the high-angle underwater bomb squad, but they don't know how to stretch a hand line. And they don't know how to put a line in operation, or they don't know how to advance an inch and 3/4 as compared to the 2.5, where they're two different animals. And I think the fire service as a whole, even training-wise, has put the engine on a back step simply because they believe it's a simple task, and it is. Opening and closing the nozzle is the simplest thing we do. It's the most pure thing we do in the fire service. It hasn't changed for 150 years. Open one way, close the other way. It's pretty simple. But getting that nozzle in a position to operate, it's the hard part. It's not so simple, and it's got to get there. And if it doesn't get there, then, like you said, people are jumping out windows, or God forbid, the people we're sworn to protect, don't make out so well.
Let me ask you this, Tim, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but I just thought of this. So we've got, say, people out there listening that are officers or future officers or even training officers in their department. And we spend a lot of time talking about the importance of a well-orchestrated, well-planned-out training drill. So let's plan out a drill for stretching a hand line. So if we're sitting with a young lieutenant or a captain or whoever at the local volunteer department, and they want to do a stretching the hand line drill, and we talked about taking baby steps, basically, not overdoing it. Let's go through a few-part series here of how we would do it. Would we start out on the truck bay floor looking over your nozzles and hose? You got any ideas on that? Like a nice methodical method of looking into properly stretching the line, and at the same time looking at our group of firefighters. We've got probies, 10-year members, 5-year members, and maybe even 30-year members.
Well, the first thing you need to do is you have to be aware of whatever hose load you have, whether it's just a regular flat load that's a static bed or a pre-connected bed, or if you're using a triple layer or a Minuteman load, or however you pack your hose. You've got to understand how it operates, and you don't even have to really take hose off the firehouse, off the rig to do that. you can just go over on, the stretch goes like this. It's packed this way for a reason. This is why we pack it.
For this reason, right.
And we do it for this reason, and when we take it off, this is what we have to do. Now, I have, my opinions on certain type hose loads that I'll leave out.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know your hose load, you can get into other aspects of stretching hose. Now we can actually, especially in those unique hose loads where some of those certain loads, you almost have to walk away from the fire and then back to the fire so the line can flake out. It's a little bit time consuming, but if that's the load you chose, you can do that. Point out that's your destination. This is where I want the nozzle with 50 feet of hose. I want to see you do that. Get it there and have it flaked out properly. So you can do that. And then there's a lot of other things you can do. You can talk about hose estimated stretches, and a lot of people have a misconception about when they talk about estimating the stretch, because every time I say, well, do you estimate your stretch? And they always tell me, a lot of people say, well, no, we're pre-connected, so we don't have to estimate the stretch. And I tell them all the time, well, that's really not true, because there is an estimate of the stretch, and every time we take hose off that fire truck, and no matter how it's packed, we have to estimate the amount of hose needed in the building that's on fire. That's
right.
where for the pre-connected hose loads, we have to estimate the stretch from the front door in. That's where it begins.
Mm-hmm.
On a static bed, then we estimate, like in New York City, we're static. So when we estimate our stretch, it's going to be from the fire truck, from the pump itself, to wherever the fire is in that building. It becomes a little bit more difficult. But in a pre-connected Mattydale or however you pack your hose, from the fire truck to the front door isn't really a big deal. It doesn't come into it because it's pre-connected. You don't have to break that line. But when you're setting up for success, you want enough hose in position at the entranceway to cover the entire building, or at the very least get you to where the fire area is. So that is an estimate that needs to be made. So you can talk about those things. If you can get your hand on old pallets, you can build out of 3 pallets, one flat on the ground, one standing up, and then one on an angle to support it. You have these 4-foot by 4-foot high wall sections. You make 8 or 10 of them, and you can make different hallway and room layouts where they have to advance the line through and make it challenging. So you can start from very simple drills and talking about the hose pack and how it's packed to, a blind stretch. There's your destination, to the estimates from the front door. And all these, we haven't even put water in the line yet.
Right.
So we can do that over and over again.
How about what nozzles you have?
Well, whatever nozzles you have, and the benefits, the advantages, the disadvantages, or whatever the nozzle you're using on certain lines. And I ask a lot of places, do you have SOPs? And most people, especially in the volunteer service, they say they don't. And I ask them, is there a bed that you stretch off of all the time if you're first due at a house fire? And they all say the same thing, yeah, we take the top one first. I said, well, what do you think that is? That's an SOP, isn't it?
Right.
Unwritten, but it is truly an SOP. It's a standard procedure. If we say we take the top bed for every work and fire, that we're first due at, then that's an SOP. So that's the one you want to know about. That's the one. What's the nozzle on that bed? Is it a smooth bore? Is it adjustable fog? Whatever it is it a constant pressure, constant flow? Whatever nozzle you have on there, it really doesn't matter, but be proficient and know how it uses. I was just talking to someone about a nozzle they have now. When you roll it all the way to the right, it clicks and closes down. Which is a feature that I'm trying to look into now because it just doesn't seem right to me. But if that nozzle does that particular nozzle you have on your rig does that, then you should train on the nozzle itself, knowing when to roll. We always say it used to be right to fight. Remember, right to fight.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And the reason we used to teach right to fight was, you're going to check your nozzle at the front door and you're going to check your nozzle on the back step, but if you advance that line into the building without flowing, you do suffer the chance of rolling that bale over as you advance the nozzle, not flowing it. So we always say before you open it, just check one more time to make sure that bale's rolled all the way to the right and it was right to fight. And that's why you taught it that way, because in a smoke atmosphere, you'll know by feel. So knowing your nozzles, like you said, is extremely important as far as a simple engine drill. And then as it gets warmer, go out and flow some water. Charge the 2.5s. and know the differences between the 2.5 as compared to the 1 3/4. I find that in the fire service now, we are terrified of that 2.5-inch hand line. I was given a class once, and a person in the classroom told me that they said, "Oh yeah, when we screw up at the academy, that's what they make us do, the 2.5." So
they
basically, we're teaching our young firemen that it's punishment. That the use of the 2.5 is punishment. Yeah. So
let's talk about the 2.5 for a minute then, because it is such a potent weapon, and it's like a soldier has to know his weapons. As firefighters, we need to know our tools of the trade. So 2.5 is a great line. It has great applications. And
it's the most versatile line in the fire service.
And we could go over what's
the only line in the fire
famous
service. Huh?
I was just going to ask you to go over the acronym for remembering when a good use of the 2.5 will come in. That adults.
That adults, advanced fire, defensive ops, I think unable to locate the scene of the fire, tons of water, and uncompartmented areas, and standpipes, right?
And standpipe, yeah.
It. Adults, yeah.
Yep. Advanced fire, defensive, unable to locate at large uncompartmented areas, tons of water, standpipes. Yeah. And it's another line another drill for another night. Is working with the 2.5. And
it's not the big bad beast that everybody thinks it is. And the problem I see with the fire service is that we train the 2.5 the same way we train the 1 3/4. There is no distinction between the two. If you handle the 1 3/4 this way, this is the way we teach you how to handle the 2.5. And it's really not the same. They're two different engine tools used two different ways. It would be like using a roof saw to break a window. They're both forcible entry tools, but you don't use a roof saw to break a window. And that's the problem with the 2.5. And the one thing we're not going to do a whole 2.5 class, but the one thing we have to remember with the 2.5 is if we go to the big line, which gives us big water, it's telling us that we have a big fire problem. So our mindset already should be slow down. Right? We have to take that slow down mindset, because especially as that company officer, it's one of those things we talked about. It takes more guts to say no than it does to say yes. The good officer is the guy that's going to say no. I can say yes, like it's like your kids. Go ahead. But on the fire ground, sometimes you got to be the guy that says no. And with the 2.5, you have to hold your people back.
And I'm looking at a fire in my home office where I am right now. I actually have it dated and labeled June 1st, 2006. We had a 2-car garage fire, and it's an unattached garage. It's fully involved, and we're stretching lines. And I remember saying to the members as they were stretching them, slow down. The garage is gone. There's not even really an exposure problem, but we got to put water on it to knock it out. But if I was running around screaming and yelling, what do you think my troops are going to do, right? And that could lead to, well, first of all, it looks unprofessional, but secondly, it could lead to injuries and making mistakes, and there's just no need for it. So 2.5's being stretched, you got a big fire, and I agree with you, just slow down, take your time.
Yeah.
And I actually said to somebody once, go ahead.
The 2.5 offers us a couple of things that the 1 3/4 doesn't, that whether we believe it or not, makes up for that slow-down mindset. One is we're flowing 250 gallons of water a minute as compared to 180 gallons of water a minute if we're using smooth bores, and even more if you're using the adjustable fog. Also, the reach of the 2.5 definitely is better than the 1 3/4, and the penetration of the 2.5 is better. So those three things alone, even though we're slowing down, we're not really doing less. We're just slowing down to evaluate our progress or their lack of it, and be able to gather more information about what's going on, especially at those commercial buildings. A lot of times we stretch them not because of the fire, but the potential of that building, definitely outweighs what the 1 3/4 is going to give to me. So we go with the 2.5. It might be a small fire, but I can't risk because of the potential, the large open area, the abundance of fuel, we go with the bigger line, and the reach, the penetration, and the flow makes up for the slowdown mindset. So we're not really doing less or moving, accomplishing less. We are accomplishing stuff, but just at a slower pace. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's another good training topic right there is the 2.5, and you could spend several weeks on that alone and different ways of doing it. And like you said, don't train on
just
a 2.5.
Just take a little victory mindset. That's all.
Yeah.
Just have that little victory mindset with the 2.5. That's all. If you win the doorway, 5, spend some time in the doorway, reevaluate, get inside the building 3 to 5 feet, operate from there. How's things going? Are we making any progress? Is it getting cooler? Is the smoke lifting? I think we can go another 3 to 5 feet. Move it 3 to 5 feet, find an operational point, something substantial where you can brace your body up against, and full flow for a couple more minutes and reevaluate. Because when we go to that big line, it's a big fire problem, so we need to slow down to gather that information.
Yeah, and we're going to need good supply for flowing lines like that. And one thing we didn't get a chance to talk to the last time is wondering if you had any information for the firefighter assigned to the hydrant. That's an important. We can't put fires out if we don't have water, and whether you have 500 in your tank or 1,000 gallons, it's still at a decent fire. You're going to go through that, so we need to secure a water supply. And sometimes we put a newer member on the hydrant, or even at our training drill, we don't spend a lot of time teaching our people the ins and outs of fire hydrants, and it's not all just opening it up and connecting a hose to the hydrant, is it?
Oh, no, absolutely not. And again, like what we said earlier on, is if you're the guy that's assigned to the hydrant, be the best hydrant man there is.
Right.
Be the best at it. There is actually a way to open the hydrant. There's a certain way that you're supposed to open it. Before you hook up, you're supposed to flush the hydrant. Whether you're in a good neighbor or a bad neighbor, whether there's caps on it or not, the way we open hydrants is we open them up and let them flow and flush them for a couple of seconds if there's any debris in the hydrant. When you open the hydrant, you're supposed to open it very slow and let water come up at a slow pace. So if there is anything that's floating on the top of the water that's at the base of the hydrant, instead of getting caught up into the bonnet, if you open it fast, it'll flow out the open gates, the open outlets. Once anything that might be on top of the water flows out, then you can open up full and give it a good flush. But if you open it up too quick, anything that's in there that could be floating on the water will get stuck in the bonnet. And then once you connect, it has the ability to come out. And I've seen paper chip bags, plastic paper chip, potato chip bags, actually shut down an operation because it gets caught in the screen.
No kidding.
Because the hydrant wasn't flushed the right way. So, again, like with anything we do on a firegrouse, you have that plan, you have that checklist. You make sure you wrap the hydrant good, so if they're going to lay away from the hydrant, you get the caps off. When you take the caps off, stand behind it. Don't stand in front of it, because if you stand in front of it and that cap comes off, some of them are pretty heavy. You don't want to break your toes. Open the hydrant slowly. Let it flow out. Once anything that could be floating flows out, open it full. Give it a good flush. Shut it down. Make your connection. Make sure it's totally on tight, and then open the hydrant the entire way. We don't care about pressures or volume coming out. The more we can get out of the hydrant, the better. When we talk about opening standpipes, we don't want to open them all the way because we're trying to give a certain pressure. But a hydrant's not that. Open it all the way once you're connected.
Kind of like turning your SCBA all the way open. Open the hydrant all the way.
Well,
and
if you turn it 2 turns and you take a breath, every time you take a breath, your bell will ring. It's almost like a hydrant going into a suction,
And with the hydrant, you talk about only open it a little bit to flush any debris. That again, it's something that we're always rushing at 100 miles an hour. Here's a situation where slow down and do it right, because if you don't, that potato chip bag could shut down the entire operation. It's a good point there.
I've seen it happen.
Wow.
Now, do
you supplement the main feed off the steamer with a secondary? Some put a gate on the 2.5 outlet, or does FDNY not do that?
Well,
I've seen
we kind of reverse lay, so we'll drive to a hydrant. But in my place, most of the chauffeurs, they're very, very good, and if they have time, they'll put a gate on the 2.5 outlet in case we have to be augmented. If we can augment ourselves, we don't have to worry about someone else doing it for us. We can get a length of 2.5 off that 2.5 outlet and augment ourselves. But most time the hydrants are good. We won't have to augment. But they do put the gate on. Yes, to answer your question, they do.
I think you mentioned too about the importance of when you charge that, when you start charging the hydrant line to kind of stand appropriately, because we actually had a member at a fire a couple of years ago suffer a knee damage because one of the caps blew off right into his knee.
Yeah, stand behind the hydrant, away from the caps. Let the caps blow out in the street. Right, and
absolutely.
if it's a multiple capped hydrant, if you have a steamer outlet and then say a 2.5, you don't have to take them both off. Take off the biggest one, take off the biggest cap, and tighten the other one. Right? I've seen those caps blow off because they weren't tightened. So before you even begin to flush it, you take that steamer cap off and tighten the 2.5 cap so it doesn't blow off. Right.
Yeah. Because again, injury slows down the operation. People concentrate on the injured firefighter. Things don't happen as quickly and efficiently as they should. And it's, what do they always say? It's those little things that lead to bigger problems on the fire ground. Sometimes it's an accumulation of so many little things, and we want to avoid that as often as.
Yep, it's dominoes. What happened? It's little dominoes. Yeah. One fall, two fall, and then it knocks down two more.
So we've got our water supply. The stretch has been made. I wanted to ask this when we were talking about the training and drill night. Do you personally have a preference between a fog nozzle versus a straight tip? I know FDNY is predominantly the 15/16 tip. I was in Kurt Isaacson's class at FDIC last week, and he was basically saying that you should use nothing other than a straight tip smooth bore, and I'd like to get your take on that.
I think that for the firefighter, since we don't get to make those decisions, I've been asked this question a lot, and I ask them, what do you have on your fire truck? And some say smooth bore, and some say an adjustable fog. And I always tell them, well, then that's the best nozzle because that's what you have. Now, with that being said, I am impartial to the smooth bore. It gives us a lot of water. It gives us a lot of punch. It gives us a lot of reach. The adjustable fog nozzle has their place in the fire service. I would never say that it doesn't. But I am kind of partial to the smoothbore nozzle. I've used it a lot. It puts out a ton of fire. And one of the other things it gives you, and a lot of people doesn't like to hear this, it's a little more destructive. And when you're dealing with a building fire now, not a room and contents, you can almost overhaul as you go. You can bring those ceilings down and get water into the attic a lot quicker than having to wait for a guy with a hook to pull those ceilings. Where the adjustable fog, the combination tips, even in a straight stream position, most of them don't have the punch to take down sheetrock. And that's a huge benefit with the smooth bore. If you've got fire in the ceiling above you where you don't have to wait or even need another guy to get those ceilings down. You can do it pretty much with the smooth bore. And once you get a hole in the sheetrock, it'll take you 30 seconds. You'll have the whole ceiling down, and you can introduce water into an area that otherwise would have taken another 5 to 6 minutes to get water into with the other nozzle. So, it does have its benefits in that sense. Yes. Yeah,
packs a wallop for sure. Now, but then you hear some people say, well, you can't ventilate with it. And, with a fog nozzle, you can turn it on fog and ventilate out the window better than a straight or a smooth bore. And I guess that's true, but you can still to some extent. Have you seen it? Have you had success or come up with ways to ventilate with a smooth bore?
Well, we don't use stream straighteners in New York City on our nozzles. So what I would tell anybody with a smooth bore nozzle, because most tips now are breakaways anyway, to take the stream straightener and the mainstream tip off, crack the bail halfway, and you'll be very surprised on what kind of a broken stream you'll get. It can push or draw out a lot of smoke. But my answer to people that say, well, it can't vent, we carry this thing on our back. I forget what it's called. If there's too much smoke, just wear the face piece. it's going to lift. That's, to me, that's not a valid argument. Being able to vent an area is not a valid argument as to whether it's a better nozzle or not. Because I can show you, if you take the outer stream tip and the stream straightener, crack the bail halfway, you'll be very surprised. Do it at the next drill. How good of a broken stream you get.
What's the reason that FDNY decided not to use stream straighteners? I'm just curious on that. What did they find, or what didn't they like?
They're clogging. They're very afraid of stuff getting up into the line. It's happened very, very rarely because we have screens on all our inlets. So anything that would come into the line would have to get through the screen and would also have to make its way through the pump itself, which is kind of difficult also. But they're concerned about clogging. I actually had a friend of mine make me a stream straightener when New York City was testing 2-inch hose. What I found with the stream straightener, along the lines of the test they did without it, I did my own. Our flow was better at lower pressure, and our stream was much better too.
Oh,
but
interesting.
They'll never go for a stream straightener.
Oh,
especially this was off a standpipe.
That's interesting. So I don't. I think we have straighteners on everything around here. So never considered that.
The only thing we use straighteners on our master streams. That's the only thing we have straighteners on.
Now, have you kept up with some of the recent information? 15/16 was the tip size for forever on 1 3/4 straight tip lines. Mm-hmm. If you were deciding to use a smooth bore, I'm reading more and more about the 7/8 tip, and what I'm hearing is you're still at the 150 to 160 GPM, which you really want, but you get a little less kinking with that. And I'm wondering if you had any experience with that. When you've been out training, have you worked at all with the 7/8 tip as opposed to the 15/16?
No, I haven't at all. And again, I have my opinions about kinking and you're talking minimal flows. You're still within what would be considered a viable fire floor between that 150 and 160.
Right.
With the 15/16, and that old adage of the nozzle opening could never be bigger than half the diameter of the hose itself. Well, the 15/16 is always bigger than half the diameter, so that kind of is out the window. I think kinking is more of a training issue. I have an experience.
What do you think the answer is? Because you do hear that a lot with the kinking. What can we do as in
learn how to stretch hose and flake out hose.
Yeah, and the problem while operating,
minimizing the amount of stretching. Well, the kinks that I've seen put lines out of service, and it's not permanent. It's only for are usually only in the section hose that's moving. I mean, by the nozzle team, and most times it's right between the nozzle man and the backup man. Are the kinks that I see that put those lines out of service.
That is
very rarely have I seen a remote kink, 50, 60 feet away from the nozzle team, put a line out of service or even create itself. I've seen them, and that's basically because you got the cancer cross. When you flaked out your line, you flaked it out with a cancer. You flipped it on and you flaked it out in a figure eight. So once you do that, as you pull that figure eight tight, you'll get that cancer cross, the ribbon, and when it finally pulls tight, you pull a catastrophic kink. So it's really a training issue. I was in Florida, and the guy showed me this thing called hose on hose. I thought it was wonderful. He flaked it out where the lead length was on the top. So when it got charged, one, it couldn't kink, and the other two, it ran on top of the other links, which made it easier to pull. They're coming out with anti-kinking hose and all this stuff. I still think that, kinking is a training issue.
Yeah, and you do get that kink. You hear from people all the time, and I agree 100% with what you said. It's between the nozzle firefighter and the backup firefighter. It seems to
That's
kink.
where I see it all the time.
Yes, and what can we tell those firefighters?
And most times as the officer, most times as the officer, you hear it before they do, before they're aware of it. The nozzle man will say, "Hey, I'm losing water," and you hear that kink between them because they're so engaged in what they're doing. They don't pick that up, and the backup man being overzealous tends to force hose instead of feed hose, and he forces a kink. And I think that happens sometimes. And the more people we put on hose, actually, I think hose is more susceptible to kinking. It sounds stupid, but you've got 10 people pushing hose instead of 2. So you've doubled the amount of people that can push a kink. You get the guy that sits at the front door and just keeps pushing hose into the front door, and the line isn't moving. He's absolutely going to force a kink. And a 15, 16-inch tip or a 7-inch tip isn't going to help that. And I don't think, personally, what I've seen, I haven't done any work with, but I don't think it's going to help that remote kink, the different tip. I think it'll help a kink within eyeshot or earshot of the nozzle team. I think it might. I haven't tested. But those remote kinks that are being forced in there by people, it's not going to do anything for that. That's a training issue.
Yeah, so you're seeing, just to reinforce what you said, one of the big problems with the kink behind the nozzle firefighter is maybe the backup firefighter's pushing hose into him, which is causing the kink.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that gets down to training.
And also
and
isn't aware,
together.
like if the nozzle man's going to go take a left, he doesn't move right. He tries to move left also. And by doing that, by not moving away from the nozzle man as he makes a turn, by turning with him, that line will kink between them too. He's got to move away from the nozzle man to keep that line in a nice flowing bow. If he moves in the same direction as that nozzle man makes a turn. So I always tell guys, as a nozzle team, think of yourselves as 6 feet of pipe, a nozzle man and a backup man, as one unit. You're one unit. So you try to keep that 6 feet of pipe from bending. So if the nozzle man turns to the left, the backup man has to move out to the right to keep that pipe straight. If he doesn't, then he's going to force that kink between the two of them.
So if they're going down the hallway, they're on the same side of the line, they're communicating well, but now they have to make a left turn. So when that nozzle firefighter goes left and the backup firefighter goes right, does the backup firefighter get on the other side of the line, or is he going to?
No, he'll just swing out to the right to keep that line straight behind the nozzle man.
Keep it straight.
If he tries to turn in right behind him, the line's going to go right anyway, because it's full of water. It's a pipe. It's going to want to do that. One of the first things you learned as a backup man, if the nozzle man wants the line high, what do you do with it? You push it to the ground. If the nozzle man wants to sweep the floor, you pull the line up. It's that whole 6 feet of pipe concept.
6 feet of pipe. I like that. Very nice. Very nice.
Well, thank you.
That's nice. And again, just a reminder to our listeners, this is the Professional Volunteer Fire Department. Tom Merrill here with Tim Klett. Glad to have you along. Tim, I just wanted to ask a couple more questions. Are we doing okay? I know we've been on for a while. Are you all right with some time,
I got
Tim?
a few more minutes. Yeah, I got a few more minutes.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to get into where are we on garage fires today? For a while we were going in the front door, cutting it off at the garage. Now I see more and more hitting it from the driveway. What's your philosophy, and what's your volunteer department, and what's FDNY doing for garage fires, or are we basing it on the situation?
Well, that's a very good question. There's a lot of variables when we talk about something like that, because that's an oddball fire as far as our line positioning is concerned. That first line, we really want it to be between the fire and anybody possibly trapped by it, because life is our number one concern. I could care less about the garage. I don't care if it burns down and everything in it. If I have somebody trapped in the house, I'm worried about protecting that one person. So that line really should normally go between that fire and anybody possibly trapped by it, which would mean the line goes in the front door. With that being said, we as the fire department, especially on the volunteer side, where the resources are an issue and manpower can be an issue, we cannot just totally bypass that garage fire. And what I mean is, our goal is going to be to get that line between the fire and anybody possibly trapped by it. But we may have to take a couple of seconds and knock it down from the driveway. Where a lot of places, if I know in New York City, if I have two engines coming in, they're going to stretch two lines simultaneously. That first line can probably go in, protect that and the second line puts the fire out. That's why it makes it an oddball, because 90% of the time the first line puts the fire out. But because that garage is that oddball, but again, on the volunteer side, with resources being said and water availability being an issue, you may have to darken that fire down from the exterior before advancing through the front door. But your end game, your end goal is going to be that primary means of egress, whether you make a pit stop and knock down the fire from the exterior, slow it down, and then get in there and try to find a way to get in the garage, make sure that the place has been searched and unoccupied, and then we can deal with it. Or you're just going to go right for the house.
Yeah.
Does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And again, nothing wrong with giving it a good knock from the driveway, but you've got to get a line in that house to protect any life that may be in there, and also just to cut the fire off and hopefully stop it from spreading in there and taking the house. So, but again, the important thing there is communication. Let people know the plan. In practice, hey, there's another training drill, right? There's nothing says we can't do a training drill on garage fires, and I'm sure there's even garages out there you could practice. We practiced once on a picnic pavilion at a local park, assuming, pretending it was a garage, and through different scenarios at people. So, again, creative drills
you'd be a fool to
inspires
tell
your people.
You'd be a fool to tell you. Yeah, you'd be a fool to tell people that you shouldn't hit it and knock it down. That's and there are people out there that will say that if you don't go in that front door, you're just this, and that leads to the fire service has kind of been divided in my estimation, into two real main, not three groups really, but two main groups. The ultra safety people that don't want us to ever go into a building again. And then there's the ultra maniac guys that if you don't go into every building that's on fire, if it's collapsing around you, you should be in there. It's just ridiculous. We have to have a balance. Then there's that group that's just in the middle that want to do their job the right way. So anybody that's telling you'd be a fool not to darken that fire down if the resources dictate that you have to. And even if the resources dictated that you didn't have to, you'd still be a fool not to at least give it a quick dash, slow it down, and then get in there and deal with the life hazard. So anybody that tells you you should get in that house, they're just not looking at the picture realistically for that attached garage fire.
And then the other fire that I wanted to cover tonight is, you wrote an article on it once, I remember, but it's also one of the most dangerous fires because if you look at line-of-duty deaths, actual fire-related line-of-duty deaths, not sudden cardiac events and things like that, the pages of NIOSH are filled with line-of-duty death reports that resulted from basement fires. I think you'd agree with me they're probably one of the most challenging and dangerous fires that we can encounter. And there's a lot of strategic and tactical considerations I think company officers need to take into play with basement fires. And I was wondering if you could give us your take on basement fires.
Well, like you said, as far as how dangerous they are, Vinnie Dunn years ago rated the most dangerous places to be in the fire ground, and the number one most dangerous spot to be is above the fire. So at a basement fire, right there alone, you're automatically right above the fire. The other thing that makes basement fires dangerous is pretty much right away they're building fires. And what I mean is if you go to a bedroom fire on the second floor of a house, you have a bedroom fire. It's a room and contents fire. That room is finished. It's sheetrocked. So you probably just have a simple room and contents fire, which anybody can handle. But most basements, true basements, aren't going to be finished. So the underside of the first floor, the floor joists are going to be exposed. So the minute that fire starts, you have a building fire. It is into the building materials itself. So before you even get the run, your operational window of opportunity, your clock is ticking already. Where at a room and contents, it's ticking, but not at the rate that basement fire is. Another big aspect that's of concern is just simple identification that, hey, this is what we have. We have a basement fire here. I think it's critical for the first arriving company level officers to identify the fact that we have a basement fire. And what I would put out there to everybody is that If you have a good smoke condition from the house and you don't know where the fire is, you can't find it, there's no indication of fire showing anywhere, I will always assume it's a basement fire until I've been proven otherwise.
A lot of people have been fooled over the years, I think.
A lot of people have been fooled. So if I have smoke pushing out of every crack in that house, it could be one room on the first floor, but I'm going to assume it's in the basement. The first thing I want to do, I want to get that basement checked, make sure it's not in the basement. I don't personally like basement fires. I don't know anybody that really does. So once I can identify the fact that I have a basement fire, I've got to start to formulate a plan. What's the problem? What problem do I have? What's my alternative? And what's the risk involved of going down and actually putting this basement out? So identifying the fact, and there's a lot of key indicators. Smoke pushing from the eaves and around the windows is a pretty good indicator. Smoke pushing from the floorboards is a pretty good indicator. People telling you, hey, the fire's in the basement. The homeowner, yeah, it's in my basement. When somebody tells me they have a basement in fire, the first question I ask them, and it seems stupid, is it a finished basement? And it must seem stupid to people, but it gets back to what I just said about that window of opportunity, that time. If it's a finished basement, I have a little bit of time now because it's finished. I don't really have a true building fire yet, but if it's an unfinished basement, that clock is ticking on me. I have a lot of things to be concerned about.
Right. Like, how do you get down there? Right? That's probably one of the first.
Again, and that's one of those oddball fires, Tom. Like you said, the garage is the oddball fire, and the basement's an oddball fire in the sense that, that first line is going to be stretched to protect the house itself. So the one difference between that attached garage and the basement fire is, as far as the occupied portions of the house, is in most municipalities that I've ever gone in, and this is across the country, that door between the attached garage and the house, by law, has to be fire-rated. It's got to be a fire-rated door. The door at the top of the basement stairs is not a fire-rated door. So that line really has to get there. It's got to find the basement stairs, and that's another challenge within itself, finding the basement stairs. In a two-story house, most times it's pretty simple. They're usually located right under the main stairway. So if you find the main stairway, you go around the back side of it, you should find your basement stairs. But at a ranch or a bungalow, it might be a little bit different. You may have to go find those basement stairs, which is a challenge within itself if you have high heat and good smoke on the first floor from the basement fire. Once you're there, you've got to make the decision whether you're going to go down those stairs or not. I call it the 12 feet of courage. There's a certain way that I teach to get down those stairs. The nozzle man has to go down face first on his butt. The nozzle man is the first one to go down the stairs. You can't send the officer down the stairs unless it's a very, very minor fire. But if you have a true basement fire, it's going to be the nozzle man, then the officer, then the backup man.
And how do you tell the nozzle man to go down?
On his butt. He's got to go on his butt with the nozzle out in front of you. And I always tell the nozzle man, when he's going down the basement stairs, I'll always teach I want a foot to a foot and a half of hose between the nozzle and the body, between your body and the nozzle, so we can make those turns. I tell him when you're going down those basement stairs, put a little extra hose, maybe another foot. Give me 2 feet of hose. The reason I tell him that is as you go down the stairs, because the line is going up the stairs behind you, that nozzle is going to want to do what? It's going to want to point itself to the floor. By putting a little extra hose out ahead of you on the way down the stairs, you have the ability to keep that nozzle high, pointed up toward the ceiling as you get lower in the staircase. So once you're down the stairs, you can go back to that regular foot to a foot and a half between your body. The other thing is nozzles. My opinion is basement fires are no place for an adjustable fog nozzle. Even in a straight stream position, it's a broken stream. You're going to generate tremendous amounts of steam. I would rather have a smoothbore nozzle at a basement fire to try to limit the amount of steam that I'm going to produce in a basement that has 4-block walls or brick or old fieldstone walls in older buildings.
Become an oven.
Yes.
To become an oven.
And the big thing is for the officer now is making the decision to get down those stairs. And this is when one of those no things come in is, you're going to open that basement door and your nozzle man's going to want to charge down those stairs. You have to hold him back. You have to open that basement door at the top of the stairs and wait a couple seconds. Let the basement do what it wants to do. And then evaluate it, whether you can get down those stairs or not. If you can't, we're going to close that door, try to maintain a position there, and find another way to get water into that basement, whether it's a basement window or a bulkhead door or wherever, a Bilko door in the back or walk in from somewhere. We'll try to get another way to get in that
Cut a hole
basement.
in the floor above and use the good old Bresnan distributor, right?
If you have to, but that still puts you right above the fire, and
then you're
time
above
consuming.
the fire.
I was never a big fan of that, because if you can't get in that basement, you've got that kind of fire. If we're not getting down those basement stairs, once that house is searched and it's deemed to be unoccupied, I may tend to back that line out and try to find another way,
right.
whether it's to slow it down. I don't like guys sitting above the fire not putting water on it. You got a free burning fire in the basement.
So if the
right
crew
now,
makes the
that
push,
line, if the crew makes the push, you said?
Yeah, I was going to say the crew makes the push, so now we need a backup line. I was always taught that backup line gets positioned at the top of the stairs and doesn't go down there. And if it's needed down there, it doesn't go down there till a third line is brought to the top of the stairs. Is that still in line with some good thinking?
Yeah. In most cases, that line's not going to go down there. That second line is not going to go down there, because one thing that's kind of common with basement fires is extension. So that second line is always a two-purpose line. The one thing a lot of people forget about a second line, not only do you got to cover the fire area, you got to cover all those areas not covered by the first line. So you have to remember that line is there to back up that first line. You're going to go there and you're going to maintain that position there. That officer on that line should have good communication with the officer in the first line, and get some feedback about how conditions are in the basement, whether they're making headway, whether they're not making headway. If they're making headway, I always like to hear we got water on a fire. To me, that's a great radio.
That is a great radio transmission.
Because it says a lot. It doesn't say that we have the fire knocked down, but it does say that we're in a position, we're putting water on the fire, and what it does, it allows other fireground activities to continue. I always say about the guy making his search and it's getting really crappy on the floor above, and he hears me go, 8-8 to command, I got water on a fire. That gives him a little bit of more adrenaline. Okay, they got water on the fire, I can continue my search. So, with water on a fire, it says an awful lot. Some activities that need to be done can be done, and some activities that don't need to be done don't have to be done anymore. Hey, maybe we got to start thinking about getting this roof for the basement fire. He's got water on the fire. Hey, hold off on the roof for a minute. So,
and as the IC, I love to hear it, because it means that they found the fire.
Yeah, it's a great, and it's what is it, 4 words? I got water on the fire, 5 words, and that's all you have to say.
Right.
And get it acknowledged.
It's
an important piece of information that you want everybody to know, but especially command. 8-8 to command. Let him answer you. I got water on the fire, Chief. And if he doesn't answer, you got that, Chief, right? I got water on the fire. Yeah, I got that. Because it's an important piece of information. It's a really, really good radio communication. So that can, at that point, that might release that second line to start covering those areas. The first question I might ask the guy in the basement is, if I'm the officer on the second line, hey, where in the basement is the fire? And if he gives me an AB corner or BC corner or wherever he tells me where the fire is, I might take my line directly above the fire there and start opening the walls and opening some floorboards to try to check for extension in those areas. So that second line is going to maintain that position. 90% of the time, it's not going to go in the basement. I'll be honest with you. If you need 2 lines in the basement of a basement fire, you probably shouldn't be down there. You know?
Yeah, speaking of extension, we have a great story in my firehouse where back it was actually a story from the 70s, but it's still a great learning experience. Our past chiefs like to tell the story about they had a rip-roaring basement fire one day, and a good, energetic crew who ended up being chiefs down the road in our department in the 80s. They were newer firefighters at the time. They went in, they put the fire out, and they came outside beating on their chest, proud of themselves. And the chief at the time just stood there shaking his head And they're like, what? We put the fire out, and he pointed and had them turn around and look, and fire was blowing out the attic because they had a balloon frame construction house. So that's a great reminder. That's still what we say in training in my department for, hey, remember fire extension, especially in balloon frame homes.
It's funny now, 40 years later. It probably wasn't funny then. Exactly.
And Tim, one last thing I want to
they're very dangerous fires.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
No, I was just going to say they're very, very dangerous fires.
Scary fires.
Basement
scary fires. And I remember at one of my officer meetings when I was chief of department, just reminding my members and printing out a line of duty. I think it was from the Ohio line of duty deaths several years ago. The female firefighter and her partner who were killed, Coleraine Township, I think it was, and started out as an automatic alarm. Ended up being a basement fire, and they plunged into the basement. Terrible, terrible death, and I used that to illustrate to my officers at the time just about learning as much as they can about basement fires, but having respect for them as well for the danger that they pose.
Yeah.
And
to tell the nozzle man, any nozzle man that are listening out there, that, you know, and this is how they go as you begin your push down the stairs, and once you make that decision to go, it's one of those things. There really isn't no turning around.
Yes. You go.
It's really bad. Then it gets better, and then it gets bad again, and then it gets better.
What do they say going through a chimney?
What that is, so at the top of the chimney, it's real bad. Okay, that's why it's really bad at the top. As you make your way down the stairs, it's just going to get better. You're getting out of the chimney. You're getting lower in this, into the basement. And then it gets bad again because you begin putting water into the basement. Now you're starting to create that steam because of the block walls. So it's going to get bad. It's going to get uncomfortable again. But then slowly but surely it starts to get better. And that's how basement fires go, especially for that nozzle team. It's real bad. It gets better. And then it gets bad again. And then slowly it starts to get better. So that's how those go.
Yeah, bad. One last thing I just wanted to cover with you real quick. It's something I believe in, and I think I wrote it down because I think you might have said you do as well. And that's the critique, a post-fire, or what I like to call a post-incident critique. Now, in the volunteer service, I hear a lot of chiefs and officers say they'll do it at the next drill, which is fine. A good formal critique at the next drill, especially of a fire, is fine. But I used to like to do them, at least a quick one, right there at the scene before I lose everybody, because in the volunteer service, they may not be at the next drill. They may not be at the next meeting when I want to critique things. So if I see something or want to review something good or bad, I used to do it at the tailboard. Not yell and scream, but just review what happened, what went on, how can we get better, what did we do good. What's your feeling on a critique after an incident or after a fire?
It's funny you say the critique to the end, right? But it kind of circles right back, and I think it ties everything that we've talked about in. I think it's one of the most important things we do after an incident. And I think for an officer, it's one of the most important things he can do to build his company and build his trust. And now we've circled back. That's why I say that. And I like to do it with, they're going to have, I just went to a post-incident critique of a fourth alarm I was at, and they had all the officers there, and, you could speak freely. But it was a month or so later, like you said, and the guys weren't there. So I think that you can have that big post-incident critique, but even on the volunteer side, if it's me, my chauffeur, and I have 3 guys in the back, I might take those 5 people, those 4 people, and only talk with them. And sit down with them and say, hey, as a unit, as us,
right,
as 4 people, 5 people, as a unit, first arriving at this incident, how do you think we did? What could we have done better? Do you think we should have got a hydrant? We think, or was the dump tank or nurse tanker sufficient? And I always say, as an officer, that is the time, because there's no democracy on the fire ground when the incident is ongoing. If I tell a guy to do something, he'd better do it. But at the post-fire critique or the post-incident critique or the unit critique, you have to allow that guy to speak freely. Because if he, again, it goes back to that training aspect. You've got to allow to let the guy know if he fails, I'm going to pick you up. I'm not going to browbeat you. I'm going to pick you up. So at those post-unit critiques, I tell guys, say what's on your mind. If you think I made a bad call, tell me. And they can't fear any repercussions or reprisal from that because it's just you and your company. It's not every other fire department that was there, the mutual aid companies, it's you and 4 other firemen. And you're talking about what you guys did. And then you'll go back to the firehouse, and if you have a true incident critique with everybody, that's good. But I like to take my unit, my company, the people that I fought that fire with personally, and say, hey, listen, this is us. This is our company. This is Montgomery 229. How did we do? Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And I like to do it right there, either at the fire ground, and as soon as we get back to the firehouse, I would take them aside and say, hey, can I see you, and you? We'll go into the back room or the weight room and say, hey, what do you think? Tell me what you think.
And you know what else you're doing there, Tim? When you do that as an officer, you're building your credibility. You're reinforcing that trust that you talk about. And it's
funny that you brought it to the end, because it did. It circles us back, and that is the box we put the cake in. That's not even the icing. It's the box that cake goes in, having the ability to sit down. And this is when, listen, I want to hear from you. I do. I want to hear what you have to say. I'm not the smartest guy in the book. I'm not the know-all to end all. I want you to tell me what you think. And you know what? And if I think that we should have done I might even say, okay, well, next time maybe we'll try that. They have a vested interest too. And I think it ties everything together. The drills, it ties how we operated, the morale issue, the trust issue, the decision issue, the credibility issue. And that's how important those critiques are. It's just not about talking about the fire. It builds credibility in yourself as an officer, the membership as firefighters, and the department as a whole. So they're extremely important. One of the most important things we do as a fire department.
And everybody from the firefighter to the department is more professional by doing all of that.
Absolutely.
And Tim,
and that's what you're looking for in the end.
Right. And in the end, and that's what our public expects, isn't it? And
absolutely.
I can't thank you enough for taking another 2 hours of your time. 2 hours yet again. And I've already planned part 3 because we haven't. I wanted to get into engine company emergencies, stretching short, pump issues, and I think we could do a show on that. So we'll pencil that in down the road. But Tim, I know you do a lot of training. I know you got some great presentations. I took that fantastic presentation just on Friday at FDIC, and the engine company officer from the firehouse to the fire floor. If somebody out there listening tonight or listening later on a downloaded podcast wanted to reach out and get a hold of you to pick your brain, to talk to you about things, or have you come in and do one of your great presentations, how can people get a hold of you?
They can get me fairly easily. I check my email most of the time. It's eng88tk@gmail.com. And even if you just have a question, I'm not one of those guys. I'm very lucky to have worked where I have. Any class I give, I give my email out, and if any student has a question, if you know anybody that ever took a class of mine, if they call me, I get back to them. If I don't have an answer for them, I'll try to find one. But I am one of those guys that I began my career in a real small town. I still am volunteering in a small town, and I think it's our responsibility if you can to give back. So absolutely reach out. I'd love to come and see you, or if you have a question, give me a shout.
And with all the fancy stuff going on in the fire service today, we were just at FDIC where we saw billions and billions of dollars, the latest equipment, the greatest gizmos and gadgets. You know what out there? What's the bottom line? What's the common denominator? Water still puts the fire out. You can write that down.
Yeah, what a novel idea.
And in memory of Andy Fredericks, who influenced me tremendously, I had the good fortune to train with him at FDIC years ago. Hey, fire goes as the first line goes, and let's do it professionally.
I'm actually going to be at the Andy Fredericks again this year down in Alexandria.
Awesome. Well, again, Tim, thank you so very much for being on the show tonight. Much appreciated, and I look forward to seeing you again. Absolutely. Thank you again, and I look forward to working with you again and seeing you down the road.
10-4. Be safe.
All right. You too, brother. Thank you so much.
All right. Good night.
Take care. Good night. Well, I didn't know it would go another 2 hours, but it did, and I think we scratched the surface. I'm not going to say we didn't scratch the surface. A lot of good information, not just on engine ops, but on leadership and the role the officer plays in our volunteer fire service and in the firehouse, and earning trust and building morale and inspiring the troops and leading by example and planning and implementing good drills, and so much good information, and Tim is just a great source of help, so feel free to reach out to him at his email address that he provided, and I want to thank you for tuning in tonight, and my next show will be on Tuesday, June 27th, right here on Fire Engineering Blog Talk Radio, and I want to give a shout-out tonight, as I do on most of my shows. Special shout-out this evening to the Surfside Volunteer Fire Department in Surfside Beach, South Carolina. There was a story that was so inspirational that was on social media last week, and this company has embraced a member of theirs named Roy Luther, and Roy suffers from cerebral palsy, and he's a member of the Surfside Beach Fire Department, and he exemplifies how all people of all types can be embraced by volunteer fire departments and utilized to the best of their ability, because even though Roy has cerebral palsy, he still plays an important role in his department, and his department accepts him with open arms. And Roy says he just won't let it stop him, and he'll do whatever he can to help. Department leaders have said how he is a tremendous help with maintenance and accountability at calls. He has helped with traffic control. He jumps in and he washes the vehicles. Roy has also not let his disability or illness stop him from bettering himself. He has an associate's degree in applied science in general business from Horry Georgetown Technical College. He graduated with honors, and he received a prestigious leadership award. He's an amazing person. He also serves as the education volunteer in the Myrtle Beach Fire Department. And one of the members said, some people might look at him as having a disability, but they look at him as being a blessing to their department. He is a definite morale booster, and he's a special man to all of them. Well, in my eyes, the Surfside Fire Department is a special fire department, and they are worthy of this shout-out. And as somebody posted, when I posted the story on Facebook, not only is the Surfside Fire Department, Surfside Beach Fire Department, a Class 1, ISO Class 1 department, which they are, but they're also a first-class organization. And their motto, Pride in Service, certainly exemplifies how they all feel. And kudos to the Surfside Beach Volunteer Fire Department in South Carolina, and also to its member, Roy Luther, for everything he does to inspire us. So that's our episode for tonight. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Feel free to reach out to me on Facebook. Give my Professional Volunteer Fire Department Facebook page a like. Reach out to me if I can help share your stories or help you out with your volunteer department issues and anything good that you're doing. I'll get it out there to share with people. And again, my next show is June 27th, and I look forward to being back with another great guest. And please, everybody, just remember that being professional has nothing to do with earning a paycheck. It has everything to do with delivering competent and compassionate service, taking care of our customers, and just as the Surfside Beach Fire Department does, taking care of our own members as well. Developing and maintaining and portraying and upholding that professional reputation is the duty and responsibility of firefighters everywhere, paid or volunteer. So again, Tom Merrill saying good night, and thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again on June 27th. Take care, everybody.